I want to thank Wanda and Marian for the opportunity to share my views. I'm taking a wide lens, but with creativity at the center. The wide lens is been making comments about the intersection of art, science, engineering, and AI. And my thesis is straightforward. AI, I will contend, will not replace human creativity, but will become probably our most powerful collaborator yet. And to understand why, we need to look at the history of creative breakthroughs and what they teach us about the future. Now, but before I get into that, I think this slide summarizes the essence of creativity. How something comes out of nothing, really. The best creativity is the one that emerges seemingly out of nowhere. Now, if we want to collaborate, if we want to understand how AI can collaborate across domains, we need to understand how different fields think and create. We normally equate domains with their products. We equate artists with sculptures and paintings. On the other hand, artists equate scientists with, discovering something. But at the essence, science is discovery. You can argue that it's making the unfamiliar familiar, as opposed to art, which is making the familiar unfamiliar. Technology is about invention. Art, people outside art will equate art with creation. No artist will use the word creation. They will use words like transforming, revealing, provoking, reflecting, a whole bunch of things. Creation is a byproduct. So these are not different outputs. Mathematics could be creation or invention, creation for the Platonist among us. Engineering is building, invention, design, kind of cuts across science, technology, and art, really. And the true domain collaboration requires understanding and integrating different thinking modes, not just combining their products. I have humanities in here, but actually what I put in there is more philosophy. And by the way, the words interpretation, questioning, understanding behind philosophy, I didn't come up with that. I had conversations with people in philosophy to see what 3 words will associate with that. So you need to talk with people to see these modes of questioning. Now, today's creative landscape forms a dynamic sort of triangle. Art and technology have a mutual attraction. I think art wants technology's ubiquity and power. Technology, on the other hand, could envy art's untethered thinking and innovation. So the art-science relationship is more one-sided. It's not really reciprocated. Technology serves as a bridge, and this is why many successful collaborations are actually art-technology partnerships. Technology is really the bridge between art and science. Now, before we dive into examples, we need to understand how creativity emerges within a domain. Okay, a domain is all the accumulated knowledge, is what would exist even if humans disappear. Algebraic topology would be a domain, condensed matter physics, fiction, poetry, all the body of work in that thing. The field are the people who practice in the domain. Okay, and the distinction between domain and field is useful because it's not enough to have a brilliant idea. That idea must navigate a complex system. The domain is the accumulated knowledge and rules of what could become part of the domain. The field is the human gatekeeping system that decides what gets accepted. For example, in art could be museum directors, curators, critics, collectors, and so on and so forth. And there are different levels of entry. For example, in math, there is no gray zone in there. Either a theorem is proved or not. The domain trumps the field, but in many other ones, the field influences the domain, and the domains can be revised. Now, I want to distinguish between two levels of creativity. Okay, a breakthrough is something that they extend what we know. They appear within the domain itself, and if it's something big enough, will enlarge the domain. And I put breakthrough, and I should have put a hyphen in there, because in some cases, the breakthrough breaks through the boundary of the domain and enlarges the domain. It makes a bigger domain, okay? A break with, and I want to have this as the upper bound of what is creative, is a different thing. Is a break with is something that is unanchored from all the domain knowledge that form part of the domain, okay? I will get into this more detail, but for example, a break with will be art from representational prior to 1900 in the West to go into abstract, Kandinsky, Cubism, Picasso, Braque. In science, prior to 1900, classical mechanics, thermo, then going into quantum mechanics. In order to have this break with, you needed to abandon assumptions that form part of the previous domain. A good example of this is Edwin Abbott's very nice book, Flatland. It gives us a perfect metaphor. Flatlanders see a visit on a sphere as mysterious. Maybe a point first, but then change its circles, never grasping its true three-dimensional nature. Mastering 2D, you can become the master of 2D, does not lead to 3D. Probably this should remind you of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that a break with insights requires stepping outside the conceptual framework that generated all previous knowledge in the domain. A system cannot generate its own transcendence. This is what we want to recreate, essentially. The early 20th century saw simultaneous break with across multiple domains. You can pick whatever you want, and you will see a break with. When Einstein and initially Bohr were revolutionizing physics, Picasso was revolutionizing art, literature was abandoning narrative conventions. Marcel Proust, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf created new forms of narrative. In architecture, we have Le Corbusier, modernism emerges, Frank Lloyd Wright, the Bauhaus. In music, we had Stravinsky, Schoenberg, abandoned tonal harmony. And it was this time in which technology was exploding, photography, flight, early cinema. So the question is, what enabled this extraordinary period of simultaneous transformation? Is what we would like to maybe mimic, create today, without creating World War I in the middle of this, okay? So in 1950, Harry Holtzman, who, by the way, was the fellow who brought Pierre Mondrian to the US, had a sort of manifesto, probably one of the first art, science, technology manifestos. And this is what Harry Holtzman said. The name of the journal was, or magazine, was Transformation, written in the way that you see there, lowercase with a break. And he said, transformation affirms that art, science, technology are interacting components of the total human enterprise. But that today, they are too often treated as they are cultural isolates and mutually antagonistic. Transformation will cut across the arts and sciences by treating them as a continuum. These are some of the people that Harry Holtzman persuaded to be part of this enterprise. You will recognize many of the names, from Buckminster Fuller to Heisenberg, Merce Cunningham in ballet, Giacometti in art, Le Corbusier, Einstein, he had something, Piet Mondrian, of course, Pierre Boulez, John Cage in music, de Kooning in painting. The experiment lasted 3 years. There you see the entire run of transformation, 1950, 51, 52. They are an amazing thing to have. I own some of these things. You can still get them somewhere. But curating this content that will try to produce this seamless connection between art, technology, and science was amazing. Now, it took 16 years after Holtzman's vision, it sort of happened. 9 Evenings was arguably the first large-scale successful art, science, technology collaboration. It involved 10 artists led by Robert Rauschenberg and 13 engineers led by Billy Kluver from Bell Labs. Bell Labs let them free for 10 months, okay? This was not artists getting inspired by science. It was 10 months of working together. They developed entirely new technologies. For example, closed-circuit TV appeared there, infrared cameras, Doppler sonar there. They were co-collaborators. This wasn't science serving art. It was genuine co-creation. Now, this is impressive. Joseph McElhenney, this series of sculptures called An End to Modernity, 2005, encapsulates the Big Bang on expanding universe. It has 20 represent science serving an art here. The scientist in here was a consultant, not a creator. It was inspiration-driven work, which has value, of course, but it's not the kind of collaborative creativity we're talking about. Okay? This one is more in the category of true integration. Dario Robleto, a friend of mine, he has an exhibit now going on in the National Gallery, working with sound archaeologist Patrick Fester, retrieved actual sound from 19th century pulse recordings. This was way before people could anticipate that you could extract sound from these recordings. Now the word recording immediately implies that you can play it back. But these were recording pulse, brain sometimes people had accidents, part of the brain was exposed. And this required artistic vision, deep understanding of history or historical technology, and rigorous scientific method. You cannot separate the artist from the scientist, from the technologist in this work. This is another one a little bit earlier. Random International, Rain Room, shows what is possible today. I mean, they had these shows starting in London, but they had it in LA. Visitors walk through actual rain without getting wet because there are sensors that detect where people are, floor, ceiling. The people become performers in this technological artistic experience. The group represents a new model. You cannot separate the artists from the technologists. They are not collaborating across domains. They are creating a new hybrid domain. Now, what about AI? Here is my historical present for AI. Okay? When photography emerged, many people in the art world recoiled. Baudelaire was not a painter, but there were people on the visual art side. Baudelaire was a poet, called it art's most mortal enemy. Photography was art's most mortal enemy. Maybe sounds familiar to some sides of the debate on current AI, but Man Ray, an American who made his home in Paris, embraced photography in the 1920s, created extraordinary work. One of his photographs was recently sold for about 12 million. Photography did not kill painting. It became a new art form. The question is, will AI follow the same path from threat to creative partner? Here is an example of cross-domains breakthrough, okay? Origami existed for 500 years, possibly for much longer, okay? At some point, mathematicians codified the foldings, and at some point after that, engineers got interested, and now we have a whole field called origami engineering. The result is that you can have packaging, architecture, robotics, aerospace, solar panels that fold for transport and then unfold to a tennis court size, something unthinkable in 1950 or so, but routine today. But here is a key question. What could have generated this merger 50 years ago? In here you have origami, but you also have something at the bottom left, you have an example of an exhibit by an artist in Latvia, sculptures. They don't look at the sculptures, Michelangelo, plaster, marble. These are examples of tensegrity. And tensegrity and origami are coming together. I'm putting their work from my friend Claudio Paulino in Princeton. The key thing in there, tensegrity has been since 1920 out there for us to grab and use. Origami for 500 years. The question is, what kind of questions could have produced these kind of outcomes and answers? Everything that you see in this slide. Okay. This is the collaboration sweet spot. Bad questions embed the answers. The question of find applications of origami in engineering. If you ask that question, you already know the answer. It already suggests a connection. A better question, probably not an obvious one, would have been, what about if we treated space deployment issues as folding problems? Again, the answer is hinted in there. The human contribution really is asking questions that may violate current assumptions. AI's contribution will be to explore the vast possibility of spaces that open up. Lots of stuff here. I'm putting what AI can do now. While it's not creative in the human sense, it excels where scale, speed, and systematic recombination matter. AI is fantastic in combinatorial creativity, I would say. But the 5 domains that stand out are combinatorial creativity, putting two things together, pattern recognition and prediction, optimization and search. I would say personalization, adaptation, I will put that last, but automation and repetitive cognitive tasks is important. So what is that one should avoid when talking about AI? And in here, is what I call avoiding the Anadol problem. Refik Anadol is a young Turkish actor, artist, and his work is visually mesmerizing. I won't deny that. He was given access to the entire collection of the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, digitally, and he fed this into some algorithms. And this is what was at the entrance of the MoMA, a 24-foot high screen. He had a team of 15 people in his studio working on this. But then the problem is that he started anthropomorphizing the ideas, the things that came out from the algorithm, and attributing human characteristics to the algorithm itself. The healing power, what is the machine dreaming when it sees modern, all the MoMA's art, making pronouncements about alternate understanding of modern art. My question is, what would have changed if instead of the MoMA's collection, he had been fed the San Francisco Modern Art Museum collection? The question reveals sort of conceptual shallowness. Now, if you think that this is hard, this is what the art critic for New York Magazine said, said unsupervised, that was the title of the work, is a crowd-pleasing, like-generating mediocrity. He went even further. The whole thing looks like a massive techno-lava lamp. It's like looking at a $500,000 price, more than $500,000, screensaver. So asking questions is important, and we should not avoid moving things out of bound, because instead of advancing the objectives, you put them backwards. Now, Picasso in 1968, the big history in computer years, he said actually this. He said, computers are useless. They can only give you answers. But the truth is that this is still valid. Questions are essentially for breakthrough creativity. Today's AI is incredibly sophisticated at providing answers, but still need humans to ask the breakthrough questions. Perhaps asking good questions is the essence of creativity. Let me give you one example. Could AI have invented cubism? I put this to exemplify the fundamental challenge of pattern breaking. Every single painting prior to 1900, the training data was representational. No statistical analysis or representational art could have anticipated the abandonment of representation itself. What Braque, Picasso, Kandinsky. So breakthroughs require abandoning things that are embedded in the prior data, prior assumptions. Another example, let's say you're an architect, you have commissions of designing amazing, you have the possibility of designing big spaces, atriums in hotels or buildings. You have access to every building ever built prior to 1960. Could one of the ideas about the atrium of these new spaces have produced what John Portman did in the mid-70s? By the way, John Portman had the advantage that besides being an architect, he was also a developer, so he had more complete freedom. And this is what Portman did. He freed the elevators from the confines of the building. Okay, that was a break with example. So I'm hedging my bets in here, putting the word yet in parentheses. What AI cannot yet do is the limits of training on history. So no analysis of pre-1900 art could have predicted abstraction and cubism. No analysis of pre-1900 physics could have predicted relativity or quantum mechanics. Every piece of training data contained implicit assumptions that Break-With had to abandon. So what is that AI can do? It's listed in this slide, okay? AI, in my view, will become a normal technology, will help us in language translation in between domains, will help us recognize patterns, maybe connections about vast knowledge of knowledge contained in the domains, rapid iteration, and combine insights from multiple fields simultaneously. But they need, in my view, still humans in the loop, being some of them being the connectors between domains, people who are understand how others think. So the answer is, could AI be the tool that makes Holtzman's 1950s vision achievable? We're starting to see genuine AI collaboration models emerging. Not AI as a tool, but as a thinking partner. Humans identify which assumptions to question, and AI can explore what happens when you're abandoned. Humans provide creative interpretation of patterns that AI may discover across domains. So my view is that we need a question-asking renaissance. We need to get better at crafting questions that unlock creative potential, that identify the very assumptions that limit our thinking. The AI age demands this renaissance in human questioning abilities. Is what I would call our capacity for productive confusion, which at the moment is not easily replaceable. The ability to be really puzzled by what everyone else takes for granted. At least for now, it seems irreplaceable. Or the ability to question ideas that everybody has implicitly assumed in some domain and no one has ever tried to revise. So we are moving from a model of individual creative genius to collaborative creative networks. The goal isn't just to create amazing individual works, but to develop people and organizations which expand thinking spaces that can catalyze innovation across multiple domains. I believe that the opportunity is now better than it has ever been. So our path forward combines lessons from history with tools from today. Want to capture this in terms of examples that we saw there. We need the process focus of 9 evenings. the meeting between Bell Labs and artists, the openness of artists that embrace photography, the cross-domain thinking that created origami engineering, and conceptual rigor to avoid using impressive tools exceed our conceptual rigor, and endowing them with human characteristics, for example, or promises that are so hard to get. Like, for example, AI in drug discovery has not lived so far up to expectations. But the key to this is creative fluidity across domains will be essentially for going forward. And this is what I call in individuals nexus thinking. So we began with the mystery of how something comes out of nothing, the essence of creativity across all domains. AI doesn't solve the mystery, but it gives us unprecedented partners in exploring it. AI is a powerful collaborator, humans providing breakthrough questions and creative interpretation, working together across traditional domain boundaries. This isn't the end of human creativity. It's probably the beginning of a new chapter that would dwarf anything that we have seen before. So that's it. Thank you.